Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope the week has gone well. I'm going to take a pass tomorrow because I'm headed up to the Samburu, but I'll tell you that in a moment. Let's start with some macro thoughts. Fed raised rates for the second time in 2017 and took quite a hawkish stance. Central bank defies weak inflation figures to maintain forecast for one further lift this year. What has caught the market's attention is a sharp slide in the rate of inflation pretty much worldwide. And if you look at things like oil, that's further going to accelerate that trend. Just another manic Thursday for markets after CPI, which was weak. Fed and Washington Post saying Trump under investigation. Yellen downplayed soft inflation, had an opportunity to voice concern about recent inflation data. She has passed. Markets are not convinced. The stalwart 10-year yield moved sharply lower after data. What we've seen is an enormous curve flattening trend. So long-term interest rates coming lower as short-term rates get pushed higher. The curve is behaving as though there's a chance they follow through on their dots. The yield spread between 2 and 10-year notes narrowed to about 79 basis points, the least since September. That's previously much higher, and bringing it within range of the lowest levels since 2007. The 2-year yield at 1.33% is among the most sensitive to impending Fed policy decisions. That's interesting, isn't it? Because it's telling us that the market doesn't see much more on the rate increase front. Otherwise, why would you hold 2 years at 133? I was a repo trader, so we would look at that, buying 2 years, financing it, and running the carry. And that's essentially the maths behind considering whether you want to hold that or not. And before yesterday's quite volatile price action, sentiment trader tweeted, "No worries, bond and stock volatility just hit an all-time low ahead of the Fed meeting." This caught my attention. Free diving is the lung-crushing, mind-altering path to inner peace. I'm very much looking forward to my getaway to the Samburu with my 10-year-old daughter Hannah. The last time we got away together was to the Borana. It was sometime last year. In October 2011 was when we last visited, and I took this photograph of the elephants crossing the Ewaso-Nyiro River, which flows through dune palm groves and thick riverine forests. Of course, there was a dreadful drought, and somebody tweeted photographs of that river totally dry. Samburu National Reserve is a game reserve on the banks of the Ewaso-Nyiro River in Kenya. On the other side of the river is the Buffalo Springs National Reserve. The park is 165 square kilometers in size and is situated 350 kilometers from Nairobi. It ranges in altitude from 800 meters to 1,230, so nothing like that swimming pool in Borana. We saw a photograph of the pool of where we're going, and I said to Hannah it would be considerably warmer than it was in Borana. Geographically, it is located in Samburu County, where there's been plenty of unrest, in point of fact, so I was a bit worried about that. In the middle of the reserve, the Ewaso-Nyiro flows through dune palm groves and thick riverine forests. It provides water without which the game in this arid region could not survive. Samburu National Reserve was one of the 2 areas in which conservationists George Adamson and Joy Adamson raised Elsa the Lioness, made famous in the best-selling book and award-winning movie Born Free. Samburu National Reserve is also the home of the Camunyak, a lioness famous for adopting oryx calves. We took a helicopter ride, and Hannah keeps reminding me how I had to bump her off it because there weren't enough seats. From Sirikoi Lodge up to Mount Ololokwe, which flies over the Samburu. Take a look at this YouTube video we posted, and I'll put up a photograph. That was in July 2015. of us on the top of Mount Ololokwe, the helicopter, and the view down. It's pretty fantastic. And finally, another photograph of elephants in the Samburu, taken from that helicopter in which we were riding. Okay, let's move on to political reflections. I just can't believe it's just practically always Trump. It's unputdownable, this chap. Special counsel is investigating Trump for possible obstruction of justice, officials say. The special counsel overseeing the investigation into Russia's role in the 2016 election is interviewing senior intelligence officials as part of a widening probe that now includes an examination of whether President Trump attempted to obstruct justice, officials said. The move by Special Counsel Robert S. Mueller III to investigate Trump's conduct marks a major turning point in the nearly year-old FBI investigation, which until recently focused on Russian meddling during the presidential campaign and on whether there was any coordination between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. Investigators have also been looking for any evidence of possible financial crimes among Trump associates, officials said. Trump had received private assurances from the then FBI Director James Comey starting in January that he was not personally under investigation. Officials say that changed shortly after Comey's firing. 22nd of May, just before the president went on his overseas trip, I wrote a piece called Apocalypse Trump, which really gives you an idea of what could possibly happen, because I think the case is really a prima facie one, I'm afraid. That fawning cabinet meeting was part North Korean Politburo rah-rah session and part The Godfather opening scene. Trump is the first president in history to have a cabinet meeting go viral. If you haven't seen it yet, you must watch the video on Monday morning and eliciting gushing testimonials and expressions of loyalty from his own appointees. Mike Pence set the tone, saying the greatest privilege of my life is to serve as vice president. And Reince Priebus, of course, was even more extraordinary. Birthday cards for Donald Trump by Jed Feynman, Nehemiah Marcos, and Jason Adam Kassenstein from the New Yorker. A little bit of humor. Trump's incoherent foreign policy is upending the world, says Bloomberg. In the beginning, it was almost possible to believe Donald Trump had a coherent worldview. There were those like Walter Russell Mead in Foreign Affairs who argued that the president had a purposeful, Andrew Jackson-inspired America First policy. Alliances and treaties, especially trade deals, would be measured according to a narrow definition of national interests rather than long-term global stability. This was a simplistic, nearsighted strategy, but at least it made some political sense. It was what his constituency wanted. The primacy of domestic electoral considerations has certainly been notable in Trump's world. His withdrawal from the non-binding Paris Climate Accord is a lot more popular in places he won, like southern Ohio and western Pennsylvania, with the exception of Pittsburgh, than it is in California, where there are more people working in solar energy than there are coal miners left in the entire nation. But there is more, or perhaps more accurately less, to Trump's foreign policy than that. There have been at least two other complicating factors. There is the suspicion that aspects of Trump's global actions, especially his curious relationship with Russia, are tangled up with his personal business interests, including the debts. And of course, there is the mix of ignorance, personal pique, toxic narcissism, and conspiracy theory that is the hallmark of Trumpery, both foreign and domestic. He squandered whatever promise he may have had. The America First populism has devolved into a distressing comfort with autocrats such as Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and the Philippines' Rodrigo Duterte. As he demonstrated on his recent Middle East trip, and the optics of this were really incredible when you think of how he dealt with King Salman, and then have a think of how he dealt with NATO. Trump succumbs too easily to pomp and flattery. It was good that he took the opportunity to promote the emerging Israeli Sunni detente. It was bad that he did it at the expense of Iran, where recent elections have strengthened democratic opposition to the military-religious dictatorship. There are now more women than mullahs in the Iranian parliament. His melodramatic concern about jihadi terrorism apparently stops at the border of Saudi Arabia, which has funded radical madrasas and terrorist groups throughout the region. He's also had nice things to say about the Pakistanis, even though their intelligence services harbour and fund the Haqqani Taliban network, which was allegedly responsible for the recent massive bombing in Kabul. His China policy is particularly strange. He's capitulated, in my view. Unwittingly, he's probably done as much to empower China as George W. Bush did to bolster Iran. Trump's opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have created a strong trading and implicitly security bulwark against China, was particularly misguided. With American markets restricted, countries such as Taiwan, Vietnam, Myanmar will more easily succumb to Chinese economic hegemony. And Trump's faith that China will be able to restrain North Korea's lethal puerility remains to be proven. And I said it's not incoherent foreign policy, it's not even a new iteration, it's simply l'état c'est moi. Man ravaged by amnesia, somehow able to hold down demanding legal job. This is a satire on the extraordinary performance of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. An Alabama man whose brain was ravaged by severe amnesia is somehow able to function in an extremely demanding legal job, leading neurologists reported on Tuesday. The man whom neurologists are calling a medical mistress performed highly exacting tasks in one of the country's top legal positions, despite having virtually no short or long-term memory. Mr. Davis Logston, the chairman of the neurology department at the University of Minnesota Medical School, said that the Alabama man's brain defies explanation. In all the medical literature, we have never seen an example of someone capable of holding down such a high-powered job while having no memory whatsoever of people he met, things he said, places he has been, or thoughts he has had. It's the stuff of science fiction. It is. Let's move on to the currency markets. Whoa, wow, they went round a lot yesterday. 111.90 euro dollar, having got to as high as about 112.80. Dollar index 96.95. Japanese yen 109.57. That went all over the place. 110.30, below 109, now at 109.57. The pound 127.12. So that's a full big figure below the highs of yesterday. Australian dollar, that's been on a roll, 0.7604, Indian rupee 64.285, South Korean won 11.2428, the Rial 3.2741, Egyptian pound 17.9997, and the South African rand right up against resistance again at 12.6829. Dollar index is trying to find a base. This was a much more hawkish Janet Yellen than the market expected. And the reason for a hawkishness is very simple. This massive precipitous drop in the dollar has loosened financial conditions far more than any tightening the Fed has done. Euro erases nearly all post-US inflation gains as Fed's Yellen starts the presser with a hawkish tone, 111.88. Aussie dollar, look at that, a big spike up again on better than expected employment numbers, 0.7604. Let's move on. Oil falls below $45 a barrel as gasoline glut signals weak summer demand. That's Bloomberg Commodities. And my crude oil price target, as I've said, ad infinitum and probably ad nauseam by this point in time, $32 a barrel. We're below 45. I wrote then, which was on the 8th of May, the OPEC go-go days of Sheikh Yamani, his prayer beads and Delphic pronouncements belong to yesteryear. Mohammed Sanusi Bakindo, the current OPEC Secretary General, is a poor imitation of Yamani and is playing with a set of cards that is stacked against him. Reserves have been depleted from Abuja to Riyadh, from Luanda to Caracas, and in all the oil-producing capitals in the world. So many capitals are fiddling while sitting on a tinderbox and playing with matches. And I said, we've already experienced a precipitous downside move. That was in early May, around May. But I'm saying that I said there's a lot further to go. Price target is $32 a barrel. Crude oil prices in extremis move exponentially. This is a move that has all the ingredients of turning exponential. I was calling it a Wizard of Oz moment. There is no one behind the curtain, and the market, I said, is primed to crash. Gold at 1261.645, the world appears to have passed peak booze. The volume of alcoholic drinks consumed globally fell by 1.4% in 2016 to 250 billion litres. It is the second consecutive year of decline, and only the third since data started to be collected in 1994. Very interesting article, actually. And the strange thing is, the population's growing bigger, so you'd suspect demand would continue to grow. For decades, consumers in emerging markets have driven beer sales ever upwards. The latest figures suggest that the froth is coming off. Emerging markets, Mexican peso at a one-year high. Take a look at this. A perfect response to Trumpery. Shanghai Composite Death Cross. Good morning, says David Inglis. Pakistan stocks enter a correction just weeks after the nation was added to the MSCI's Emerging Markets Index. Qatar signs a $12 billion deal to buy F-15 jets from the US. Qatar's Ministry of Defense said on Wednesday the country signed a deal to buy F-15 fighter jets from the United States for $12 billion. The deal was completed despite the Gulf country being criticized recently by US President Trump for supporting terrorism. My piece over the weekend was about rolling over Qatar, and I said returning to the Riyadh summit, where the kingdom committed to a fifth of its remaining forex reserves, which will fall off a cliff when oil slumps towards $32 a barrel, to a purchase of beautiful American arms speaks to a heist. The House of Saud's protector has always been the US. But this time, an American president has excelled himself at extracting a mind-bogglingly egregious price. I have to surmise that the Emir of Qatar balked at the price, and that his adversaries are saying, okay, we can always do it by force, because this looks like a mugging in a dark alley now. Well, $12 billion later. Doha from the sky. And a couple of articles, one from May 2016, Qatar punching beyond its size, and one from August 2011, soft power, Qatar and Al Jazeera. Let's move on to Africa. Shabab kills 17 and takes hostages in Somalia's capital. An assault by militants in the Somali capital, Mogadishu, began Wednesday evening with a car bombing at the gates of a hotel popular with foreigners and continued with gunfire at a nearby restaurant. At least 17 people were killed and dozens of others were taken hostage, according to local officials, and the emergency services special forces rescued more than 50 hostages, according to the state news media. So they're responding by saying they're very much alive, notwithstanding President Trump has changed the rules of engagement in Somalia. President Adesina of the African Development Bank posted this photograph of a meeting between leaders of Africa and the G20 in Berlin, where they put forward this Marshall Plan. Investors snap up assets of nation where defaults are new normal. The southern African nation's currency, this is Mozambique, has posted the world's biggest gain in 2017, while the price of its overseas bonds, which the government defaulted on in January, has soared by about 30%. Making them among the best performing sovereign notes in emerging markets. This is Mozambique again. You've had this stupendous rally. And what I said was, what's buoyed investors is refocusing on the fact that the country sits on a crown jewel when it comes to gas. And the question is, it will be monetized. It's just in the near term, there's a liquidity crunch. 26th of July 2016, I was replying to Martina Stevis, and I said, I think Mozambique is a trading buy. The bonds have rallied about 60% since that point. And I wrote in June 2014 about how Mozambique could be the next Qatar. Rand Merchant Bank Business Confidence Index fell to 29 points in the second quarter from 40 points. This is the lowest since the financial crisis of 2008. South African oil shares at a 3-month low, but it's up 1.65% this year. Dollar versus rand. Rand is right up against resistance at 1268.29. I think you can sell the rand. Egyptian pound 1268.29. Sorry, just below 18. Nigerian oil share 2-year highs up 25%. Ghana Stock Exchange up 13.83% year to date. Let's go on to Kenya, where the IEBC's Chebukati calls for a meeting with presidential candidates as ballot papers tender row escalates. The Kenyan opposition is linking the president's family to the ballot contract. Kenya's main opposition party linked President Kenyatta's family to a Dubai-based company awarded a tender to print ballot papers for this year's elections as it demanded the contract be cancelled. Kenyatta's brother Muhoho is the local contact for Al Ghurair and possibly a shareholder, Musalia Mudavadi. State warns diplomats against interfering with elections, and a couple of diplomats were talking to me about this. The government on Wednesday issued a veiled warning to diplomats and foreign entities against interfering with the elections, even as debate on the Electoral Commission's tendering for ballot papers gathered steam. So we've got to keep an eye on that. Chinese investment in Africa, very interesting essay, Beijing's testing ground. This is David Pilling in the FT. Go to Rich Wrap-Up, scroll to Kenya to have a look at it, but it starts off on Pate Island off the coast of northern Kenya. There are light-skinned Africans with Chinese features, fragments of ancient Chinese porcelain, and even a place called New Shanghai, all lend weight to a local story that shipwrecked sailors from the fleet of Zheng He, the 15th century Chinese explorer, settled on the island many years before Columbus set foot in the US. In Kenya, records show that huge ships reached the East African coast more than 500 years ago and swapped Chinese treasures for exotica such as ivory, ostriches, and zebras. I've spoken about that a lot before, and also I think it speaks to the resurgence of the Indian Ocean economy. The Chinese have become much more effective at using that story for soft power needs. To have 54 African nations as friends is very important for China, says Jing Gu, director of the Center for Rising Powers and Global Development in East Sussex. It's a very in-depth article, worth reading in full. I'll just pull out a few more pieces. This is Howard French. You remember I interviewed him not a long time ago. Africa has been a field where China can try various things in a very low-risk environment. He says Africa has been a workshop of ideas that now have a much bigger scale and strategic significance. A few numbers illustrate the shift. In 2000, China-Africa trade was a mere $10 billion. By 2014, that had risen more than 20-fold to $220 billion, according to the China-Africa Research Initiative at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies in Washington. Though it has fallen back because of lower commodity prices, China contributes about 1/6 of all lending to Africa, according to a study by the John L. Thornton China Center at the Brookings Institution. Certainly, China has been attracted by Africa's abundant resources, oil from Angola, Nigeria, Sudan, copper from Zambia and the DRC, and uranium from Namibia. Yet the emerging China-Africa relationship goes well beyond commodities. One of the top destinations for Chinese investment is Ethiopia, a mostly resource-poor country of 100 million people that is pursuing Chinese-style state-led development. Since 2000, Ethiopia has been the second biggest recipient of Chinese loans to Africa. Beijing has 52 diplomatic missions in African capitals against Washington's 49. Interesting point. Narrative of donor and recipient has changed considerably with China, says Dambisa Moyo. Afrobarometer survey of 36 African countries found that 63% of Africans found China's influence somewhat or very positive. I give the Chinese a fair amount of credit, says Mr. French. They've been mounting quite a steep learning curve from almost no knowledge to becoming very sophisticated players, definitely. China is actively pursuing an African industrialization strategy. It is hoping to transfer low-wage production to Africa in the next 10 years. So a very interesting piece worth reading in full. Kenya's opposition leader wants to dismantle white-owned ranches. The Kenyan opposition leader, Raila Odinga, is denying it on social media, has announced that he will dismantle white-owned ranches in Kenya if he wins in August general elections. Odinga said the violence that has engulfed the rest of Laikipia region in central Kenya has been due to mismanagement by a handful of large-scale ranchers. These ranches are too big and the people don't even live there, he said. They live in Europe and only come once in a while. I wrote a piece in February connecting the dots, food prices, the weather in Laikipia. Take a look. Interesting piece by the crisis group Storm Clouds Gathering over Narok are partly national. Who takes that vote will be key. That's the Maasai vote. Vodafone's recent transfer of 35% stake in Safaricom to Vodacom SA is the largest deal in Kenya since 2011. $2.6 billion. But in this diagram, what's missed out is Brookside and Danone. Nairobi All Share came down yesterday 0.58%, but it remains up 10.57% this year. NSE 20 closed 0.56% higher. It's up 10.06% year to date and at an 11-month closing high. MPs stall Treasury's plan to bail out Kenya Airways. Look, that current ratio that's being proposed is not going to fly at all. Basically, the banks are making out like bandits. Minority shareholders are getting stuffed to the gills, and it's just not going to work. Kenya Airways, and I think that's why after a 30.93% fall, we've seen a sharp rebound by the daily maximum this morning. Once again, wishing you a great weekend. I'm taking a long one because I'm off out of Wilson, which is my magic portal to the Samburu, and I'm looking forward to that enormously with my daughter. Thank you for stopping by.